The morning sky over Denver was a soft silver blue, the kind that makes you pull your jacket tighter and breathe in the quiet before the city wakes. At the airport, passengers shuffled through security holding coffee cups and boarding passes, faces half asleep but ready for another ordinary day. Among them was a young woman who looked barely out of college. She carried a small backpack. Nothing fancy, just a worn gray canvas bag with a patch of a tiny star stitched onto one side. Her name, though no one knew it then, was Avery Ruiz. She moved through the airport like someone used to traveling alone, quiet, alert, and calm. She didn't rush like others did. When the boarding gate opened, she waited until most of the passengers had gone ahead before stepping forward. Her ticket said, Seat 12F, a window seat. As she walked down the narrow aisle of the plane, people looked up and then quickly back down to their phones or newspapers. She gave a polite smile to the flight attendant, tucked her bag under the seat, and settled by the window. From there, she could see the long stretch of runway, gray against the golden dawn. She looked young, maybe 19 or 20. Her hair was tied in a low ponytail, and she wore a plain hoodie the kind students wear on early classes. Nothing about her stood out. She was just another passenger in a row of tired travelers. The man sitting next to her, maybe in his 50s, smiled kindly. "Heading to D.C. for school or family?" he asked. Avery turned from the window and smiled softly. "Work," she said. He nodded, surprised but polite. "Ah, hard worker, huh? What do you do?" She thought for a moment. "I fly," she said. The man chuckled. "Fly? Like as a flight attendant or pilot in training?" "Something like that," she said simply, her eyes drifting back to the window. The engines hummed to life, and soon the plane rolled forward, gathering speed until the ground fell away beneath them. Clouds opened up like soft cotton fields, and the morning light filled the cabin. As they leveled off, the man beside her ordered orange juice and a cookie. He offered one to Avery. She thanked him but shook her head. She seemed lost in thought. Not anxious, not nervous, just far away. From time to time, she pulled out her phone and scrolled through photos. Most were of wide skies, sunsets, hangars, planes. One photo showed her in a flight suit standing beside a jet. Her smile in that picture was small but certain, the smile of someone who'd found her place in the world. She quickly locked her phone when she noticed the man looking. "Beautiful sky," he said, pretending not to have noticed the photo. She smiled. "It is." The flight continued quietly. Some passengers napped, others watched movies. A child cried 2 rows ahead, and a flight attendant knelt to comfort him. Avery barely moved, her gaze steady on the horizon outside the window. Halfway through the flight, the captain spoke through the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're flying at 35,000 feet. If you look to the right, you might spot the outline of an Air Force training base below us. Sometimes we get lucky and see jets practicing maneuvers." The man beside her leaned toward the window. "You see anything?" Avery smiled faintly. "Not from this height. But I know the sound." He tilted his head. "You've been near them?" Her voice was calm. "A few times." The plane hit a small pocket of turbulence, and several passengers gripped their armrests. Avery didn't flinch. Her hands stayed steady, her breathing even. She looked at ease, almost too at ease for someone her age. The man chuckled nervously. "You're calm. Most people hate this part." She looked at him, eyes kind. "It's just air. The plane's doing its job." He nodded. "You talk like a pilot." She gave a quiet laugh. "Maybe." As the hours passed, the plane crossed over plains and rivers, the sky shifting from gold to white. Somewhere over Kansas, a group of clouds formed tall and bright beside them. The sunlight bounced off the wings, filling the cabin with a soft glow. Avery closed her eyes for a moment, remembering another kind of sky. One not seen through thick glass, but from a cockpit. With a helmet pressed tight, her gloved hands on the controls. In her memory, the radio crackled and someone's voice said, "Comet, you're clear. Level to 9,000. She smiled faintly at the thought. That was her call sign. Comet. Back then, she hadn't been sitting quietly in seat 12F. She'd been flying at nearly the speed of sound, the world below a blur of blues and browns. It had been the kind of moment that reminded her why she'd worked harder than anyone to get there, why she'd studied late, trained longer, pushed past fear. She'd wanted to touch the sky since she was a kid. Not for glory, not for power, but for peace. The kind of peace she only found when she was flying. The intercom buzzed again, breaking her thought. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain. We'll be descending soon. Weather in Washington looks clear. We should be on the ground in about 35 minutes. The man beside her started gathering his things. I've got a meeting as soon as I land, he said. Always chaos when I travel. Avery smiled. You'll make it, he grinned. You sound sure, she nodded. I've been through tougher landings. He laughed again. What, like in bad weather? Avery looked out the window one more time. Below them, she could now see faint lines of air bases and runways stretching near the Capitol. Her eyes softened. Something like that. The descent began. The engines shifted pitch and the plane tilted slightly downward. The view outside turned from sky to city, from white to green and gray. As they neared the runway, the captain's voice came again. Folks, if you're sitting on the right side of the aircraft, you might catch sight of Andrews Air Force Base, home to some of the most advanced fighter jets in the world, including the F-22 Raptor, heads turned toward the windows. Passengers leaned, phones ready to snap pictures. The man beside Avery pressed his face close to the glass. Wow, he whispered. Look at those beauties. You ever see one up close? Avery tilted her head slightly. The sunlight glinted off the silver edge of her dog tags, half hidden under her hoodie. Once or twice, she said. You must have gone to an air show, he guessed. Those pilots, an incredible people. She smiled at that. They are. Imagine flying one of those, he said dreamily. Avery looked out at the distant hangars where a few jets stood shining under the sun. Her expression softened, almost wistful. I don't have to imagine. The man laughed, a short, friendly laugh. Then he saw her face. She wasn't smiling this time. Not joking, just remembering. Oh, he said quietly. You mean? She nodded. I used to. His eyes widened, but before he could ask anything else, the plane touched down with a smooth thud, tires meeting runway, wings flexing slightly. The passengers clapped softly, the kind of polite applause that sometimes follows a good landing. Avery stayed quiet, her hand resting lightly on her backpack. When they taxied toward the gate, the captain added one final note. As we pass the military side of the airfield, you'll see some of our country's finest aircraft. Always a proud sight. Avery looked one last time. Beyond the fence, a small group of pilots in green flight suits stood near a jet, helmets tucked under their arms. She knew that feeling, the pre-flight calm, the heartbeat that matched the hum of the engines. For a moment, she missed it deeply. Then the seatbelt light went off, and reality returned. Rolling luggage, chattering passengers, the shuffle of 100 lives going their separate ways. Inside the terminal, people rushed toward baggage claim. Avery walked slower than most. She paused near a window overlooking the airfield. The jets were smaller from this side, but she could still tell their shapes. F-22 Raptors, lined like sleeping eagles waiting to take off. She stood there quietly for a minute, lost in thought. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A message flashed. Welcome home, Comet, briefing at 1600, Hangar 7. A smile spread across her face. Small, but real. She slipped her phone away and walked on, blending into the crowd once more. To everyone else, she was just a young traveler in a gray hoodie, another face in the airport rush. No one knew that the girl in seat 12F had once flown faster than sound, that she'd carried the weight of a nation's newest aircraft on her shoulders, or that her calm silence wasn't shyness and it was discipline. As she reached the exit, sunlight spilled through the glass doors. A breeze lifted a few strands of her hair. She adjusted her bag strap and stepped outside. A black government car waited at the curb. The driver got out quickly, saluting as she approached. Good to have you back, Lieutenant Ruiz, he said. She nodded lightly. Thanks. He opened the door for her. As she slid in, she glanced once more toward the runway in the distance. A jet took off, its silver body flashing against the bright sky. Her eyes followed it until it disappeared into the clouds. Then she whispered softly, almost to herself, See you soon. The car pulled away from the airport, merging into traffic toward the city. Avery leaned back against the seat, her mind already shifting gears from the quiet girl in seat 12F to the officer, the pilot, the legend known by one simple name, Comet. But to the man who'd sat beside her, she would always just be that calm young woman who smiled kindly and seemed to know the sky better than anyone he'd ever met. He'd tell the story later, years after that flight, about the girl in 12F who once said she flew, and how he hadn't realized he'd shared a plane with one of the youngest and most fearless pilots in the U.S. Air Force. When Avery Comet Ruiz stepped out of the car at Joint Base Andrews, the sun was just beginning to climb higher, spreading warm light across the runway. The wind carried the familiar scent of fuel and steel, the smell of aircraft engines and early morning maintenance. It was a smell she had missed. She straightened her shoulders, adjusted the strap of her backpack, and looked around. Hangars stood in neat lines across the base, their wide doors open to reveal the shapes of powerful jets resting inside. Technicians moved briskly from one aircraft to another, their voices mixing with the low hum of machines. It had been 3 months since she last stood here, 3 months since she had taken that quiet commercial flight home, hoping for a few weeks of peace after a long stretch of testing missions. But as she looked across the airfield now, she felt the same spark she always did, a pull toward the sky, strong and steady. A tall man in uniform approached her, his expression serious but warm. "Lieutenant Ruiz," he said, saluting sharply. "Good to have you back." She returned the salute. "Good to be back, sir." He smiled slightly. "The team's in Hangar 7, they're waiting for you." She nodded and began walking. The rhythmic sound of her boots against the concrete echoed faintly as she made her way toward the hangar. With every step, her heart beat a little faster, not with fear, but with the quiet excitement that came before every mission. Inside Hangar 7, a group of pilots and engineers stood gathered around a large table. On the wall behind them, digital screens displayed diagrams and data, wingspans, fuel capacity, radar signatures. When she entered, the room grew noticeably quieter. Conversation stopped. Heads turned. Someone whispered, "It's Comet." Avery gave a polite smile and nodded to the group. She wasn't one for grand entrances. She had earned her reputation not through words but through calm action. The commanding officer, Colonel Reeves, stepped forward. "Lieutenant Ruiz," he said with genuine pride, "welcome home. We've been looking forward to this." "Thank you, sir," she replied. He motioned toward the sleek silver aircraft in the center of the hangar. "Meet the X-22 Valkyrie, our newest prototype. You'll be one of the first to take her out." Avery's eyes widened slightly. The jet gleamed under the bright lights, its smooth surface reflecting the room like a mirror. It looked like something from the future, all sharp edges and hidden power. "Beautiful," she said softly. Reeves nodded, "And fast. She handles like a dream, but still needs a pilot who understands the machine, not just the numbers. That's why we asked for you." Avery looked at him. "I'll do my best, sir," he smiled. "That's why we trust you." Later that morning, Avery changed into her flight suit. The green fabric fit snugly, the patches on her sleeve freshly pressed. Her helmet rested on the bench beside her, painted with her call sign, Comet, in white letters across a deep blue stripe. She ran her hand over the lettering for a moment, remembering the day she earned it. She hadn't chosen the name. Her team had. It came after a test flight when she managed to steady a failing jet that had lost power mid-air. She had guided it safely back to base, calm even as alarms blared. When she landed, her instructor had laughed with relief and said, "You came out of nowhere fast and bright and like a comet." The name stuck. Now, as she zipped up her suit and stepped outside, the same old feeling filled her chest, the mix of focus, peace, and thrill that always came before takeoff. A small crowd had gathered near the hangar's edge, engineers, flight officers, even a few senior pilots. Among them were men and women who had logged thousands of flight hours, veterans who had seen every type of aircraft imaginable. But when Avery walked toward the jet, helmet under her arm, they straightened instinctively. Not because of her rank, but because of what she represented. She was the youngest test pilot in the division's history, the one who never raised her voice, never sought attention, and yet had done things most thought impossible. Reeves stepped forward again. "Everything's set. You'll take her up to 20,000 feet, check handling, then run a systems test. Simple first run?" "Yes, sir. Anything you need before we start?" Avery smiled slightly. Just the sky. As she climbed into the cockpit, the world below her faded away. Inside, it was quiet, almost sacred. The controls fit perfectly beneath her hands. She took a deep breath, the familiar scent of leather and metal grounding her. "Control, this is Comet. Preparing for takeoff. Copy that, Comet. Runway's clear. You are go for launch." The engines began to hum, low and powerful. The jet rolled forward slowly, then faster, the runway stretching endlessly ahead. Avery kept her eyes straight ahead, her hand steady on the throttle. At 150 knots, the wheels lifted. The moment the ground fell away, Avery smiled. The sky opened around her wide and blue, and all the noise of the world below disappeared. She felt weightless, alive, free. Comet. Report status! The voice from base control crackled in her ear. Smooth climb, she said calmly. Engine stable, altitude increasing. Handling's clean, copy that. You are cleared to 20,000 feet. The clouds formed soft layers below her. Sunlight hit the canopy, scattering in golden sparks across her visor. She moved her hand slightly, testing the jet's response. It was smooth, almost intuitive, like it understood her before she moved. This is beautiful, she said quietly to herself. The radio stayed silent for a moment. Then Reeves's voice came through, warm with pride. Glad to have you back up there, Comet. Glad to be here, sir. For the next 30 minutes, Avery tested the Valkyrie's controls, running checks, adjusting altitude, and monitoring systems. Everything responded perfectly. The jet was not only fast, and it was graceful, almost alive under her touch. At one point, she tilted into a slow roll, the earth spinning below her in perfect balance. For a brief second, the sun caught her helmet, flashing her call sign like a spark in the sky. Down below, the other pilots watching from the hangar couldn't help but smile. Even on the ground, you could tell it was her. The calm, the precision, the quiet confidence, it was unmistakable. When she finally brought the jet back down, the landing was smooth as glass. The moment the wheels touched the runway, applause broke out near the hangar. Engineers cheered softly, some clapping, others exchanging proud looks. Avery climbed out, pulled off her helmet, and took a deep breath. Her hair stuck slightly to her forehead, and her cheeks were flushed with adrenaline. But her smile was calm, the same steady smile she'd worn in seat 12F. Colonel Reeves met her at the stairs. Perfect run, he said. You made that look easy. Just did what I was trained to do, sir. He laughed. That's what you always say. But you and I both know it's more than that. She shrugged lightly. The jet did its job. Reeves shook his head with a smile. So did the pilot. Later, when most of the team had gone, Avery stayed behind in the hangar. She liked the quiet after a flight, the echo of her footsteps, the faint hum of cooling engines. She walked up to the Valkyrie again, running her fingers lightly along its wing. This one's special, she whispered. You'll go far. Behind her, a soft voice spoke. You always talk to the planes? Avery turned. It was one of the young engineers, a woman probably her own age. She blushed slightly. Sometimes, she admitted. They listen better than people, the engineer smiled. I hope someday I can fly like you. Avery shook her head gently. Don't try to fly like me. Fly like you. That's how you make your mark. The girl nodded, inspired. Yes, ma'am, Avery smiled. And don't call me ma'am. I'm still learning too. As night began to fall, Avery walked outside one last time. The air was cool now and stars were beginning to appear. She tilted her head back, watching them slowly come alive against the darkening sky. Each one reminded her of a moment, her first solo flight. Her toughest test, the times she doubted herself but kept going. People often thought courage meant fearlessness, but Avery knew better. Courage was feeling afraid and flying anyway. A memory flickered. The first time she'd sat in a jet alone. Her hands had trembled slightly on the controls. Her instructor's voice had come through the radio, steady and patient. Trust yourself. Comet, you belong up there. And she did, she still did. Before heading back to her quarters, she stopped by the observation deck overlooking the runway. In the distance, the other pilots were preparing for their next flights. She saw the gleam of helmets, the soft glow of instrument lights. For a moment, she imagined what the passengers on tomorrow's morning flight out of Denver might see. The faint streak of a jet cutting across the dawn sky. Maybe someone in seat 12F would look out and wonder who was flying that fast, that high. Maybe they'd never know it was her, and that was fine. Avery didn't need the world to recognize her name. She only needed to know that she had done what she loved, that she had given her best, and that she had helped others believe they could do the same. As she turned to leave, her phone buzzed again. A message from Colonel Reeves, mission report flawless. Debrief tomorrow at Oro 900, proud of you. Comet. She smiled softly and slipped the phone back into her pocket. The stars above shimmered brighter now, and somewhere far away a jet soared across the night sky, its engines whispering through the darkness. Avery watched until it faded, then whispered, "Keep flying." And she knew, in her heart, that no matter where she went, whether sitting quietly in a passenger seat or soaring above the clouds, she would always be part of the sky.